Everyone expected Daniel Thompson, Lagos' youngest real estate billionaire, to marry a woman who would fit the image, a flawless beauty, a woman with a polished foreign accent, someone from a family whose surname opened doors, or at least a woman whose presence looked expensive even in silence. Instead, he married Grace Adams, a quiet, soft-spoken widow with 2 children who lived in a 2-room apartment in Surulere. The news didn't just spread across Lagos, it erupted, on blogs, it became the most confusing marriage of the year. On WhatsApp groups, it became he must be planning something else. In society circles, it became this marriage won't survive 6 months. Because to them, Grace did not qualify, not by lifestyle, not by class, not by beauty standards, not by influence. They did not care that her dignity was priceless. They only saw what money could measure. The ceremony took place at a small marriage registry in Ikoyi, a venue so simple that several guests kept asking the ushers if they were sure it was the right address. There were no celebrity appearances, no TV crews, no live band, no luxury decor, no convoy of exotic cars. Blocking the streets, the guests, mostly Daniel's business associates, sat looking confused, as if someone had leaked a wrong invitation. Even the registrar, while flipping through the marriage file, paused briefly as if expecting a different bride to walk in. Grace sat quietly beside Daniel, her palms pressed together on her lap as though holding herself firm. Her dress was clean, neatly pressed, but not luxurious. Her shoes were simple and comfortable, not designer. Her makeup was light, almost invisible, like someone trying not to take up space. Her little children, Michael, age 10, and Ella, age 7, sat close to her, both holding onto her gown like a lifeline in an unfamiliar world. Daniel, wearing a tailored navy blue suit, never once looked away from her. His hand found her hand under the table, and he squeezed gently, not for show, but to remind her she belonged there. No matter how loudly the room disagreed, as the couple signed the register, 2 women whispered loud enough for Grace to hear, "This is unbelievable. After all the women he could have had. Maybe she did something we don't know. This kind of thing doesn't just happen." Because in Lagos, humility is suspicious, and simplicity invites investigation. Outside the registry, a few photographers tried to make sense of the situation, searching for any sign that she had come from the world he belonged to. But they found no extravagant jewelry, no public presence, no celebrity friend circle, nothing to feed their curiosity. Grace looked like a woman who was grateful to have peace, not attention. When they arrived at Daniel's private mansion in Banana Island, the gate alone felt like an entire border of class. Grace stood in front of it, not breathing in excitement, but wondering if she could ever exist without feeling like a visitor. Inside, the house was spotless, intimidatingly perfect, and quiet like a museum, the kind of quiet where every sound echoes and every movement feels judged. Michael and Ella paused at the entrance, afraid to step on the shining marble floor. Grace whispered gently, "It's okay. Walk in slowly, don't rush." Daniel watched them with a warm, soft expression, an expression that only someone who understood the weight on her heart would recognize. Because he knew something everyone else did not, this was not the first time Grace stood at a doorway, and questioned whether she deserved to cross it, and that was where her story truly began, long before this wedding day, long before Daniel Thompson became a name that made investors lean forward in boardrooms. He was just another struggling young man in Lagos, trying to survive each day without losing himself. He lived in a small, poorly ventilated room in Lagos, sharing compound with tenants who woke up before dawn and returned long after the streetlights flickered out. The walls had faint cracks, the ceiling leaked during heavy rain, and the sound of quarrels echoed through the hallways like background music. Every morning, Daniel woke at 4:30 a.m., ironed his only work shirt, cleaned his black shoes with water and a tiny bit of petroleum jelly, then boarded 2 buses and a kiki to get to his internship at a small property consulting agency in Yaba. The firm was too small to be called a company and too ambitious to admit it was struggling. His monthly stipend couldn't even cover his transport and meals, so he learned how to stretch hunger into patience. Yet, he never complained. He read property investment books borrowed from roadside vendors, saved articles on his old Android phone, and practiced negotiation skills using himself as both buyer and seller. His colleagues saw only a quiet intern. They didn't see the fire hidden beneath silence, but even the strongest internal fire can flicker when loneliness becomes a daily meal, and that was when Grace entered his life. One rainy evening, after being dismissed from work for arriving late due to traffic, Daniel stopped by a small local supermarket in Surulere to buy bread and sachet water, the most affordable dinner he could manage. The supermarket was almost closing when he walked in. The young woman behind the counter looked exhausted but still offered a polite smile. Her name tag read, Grace. Daniel greeted her gently, trying to hide how drained he felt. She noticed his soaked shirt, his tired eyes, and the way his hands trembled slightly while counting money. When he paid, he was short by 500 Nigerian nairas. Money that could cost him dinner. He immediately stepped back, pulled out the bread, and whispered, "Please remove it. I'll take only the water." Without asking questions or offering pity, Grace quietly completed the balance from her own purse and pushed the bread back toward him. "You need it. Don't refuse." It wasn't charity, it wasn't flirtation, it was human understanding. Daniel tried to thank her, but his voice cracked. She simply nodded. That single act became the first brick in a friendship that neither planned but both needed. Days turned into weeks, then months. Daniel started visiting the supermarket not because he needed anything, but because someone there saw him beyond his struggle. When her shift ended, Grace would sometimes sit outside with him under a small wooden shade beside the store, where they spoke about life, fears, and dreams that seemed bigger than their reality. Daniel spoke with the quiet certainty of someone who believed that struggle was a temporary address, not a permanent identity. "One day, I'll build housing estates in Lagos. Not for the elite alone, but for people who work hard like us." Grace didn't laugh. She didn't say "I hope so." She said, "You will. You think like someone who will create solutions, not just complain about problems." For a man who had nothing, that sentence felt like oxygen. In a world where no one believed he would become anything, Grace believed before evidence existed, and belief, real belief, is sometimes more powerful than money. What neither of them realized was that life was quietly preparing a storm that would test the foundation they were building, a storm that would eventually become the reason behind the wedding everyone questioned. Their connection did not begin with dramatic confessions, loud promises, or romantic gestures that social media celebrates. There were no dates in restaurants, no flowers, no matching outfits, no selfies, just two people who found comfort in each other's silence. Daniel never officially asked Grace to be his girlfriend, yet everyone who watched them speak would think they were already married. What bonded them wasn't excitement, it was understanding. He understood her sense of responsibility. She understood his fear of failure. Both understood what it meant to start life from the bottom without a safety net, and slowly, they became the safe place neither had grown up with. Though Grace had a calm and gentle presence, her life was far from soft. She lived in a renovated boys' quarters in Lagos, sharing the space with her widowed mother and her younger siblings. After their father's death, what kept them from sinking completely was Grace's discipline, her ability to survive on little without complaining. She earned a modest income from the supermarket, woke early to help her siblings prepare for school, and returned late after closing her shift. Every month, after contributing to house bills and school needs, she had nothing left for herself. Yet, she never envied anyone. She didn't dress to impress, she dressed to function. She didn't compare her life to others, she focused on what she could control. She didn't seek attention, she protected her peace. Her value wasn't in what she owned, it was in how she lived. And Daniel noticed everything. One night, after she closed from work, they sat outside the supermarket like usual. Rain had just stopped, and the air smelled like wet dust and cold breeze. Daniel rested his palms on his knees, staring ahead with worry in his eyes. "Sometimes I'm scared I'll never become anything," he whispered. Grace didn't panic. She didn't say "Don't talk like that." Instead, she asked one question: "What exactly are you scared of, failing, or people knowing you failed?" The question hit deeper than comfort words ever could. He took a slow breath. "Maybe both." Grace nodded gently. "You don't have to prove anything to the world first. Prove it to yourself. That's where strength comes from." Daniel turned and looked at her, really looked, and he felt something shift. She wasn't motivating him like a speaker, she was reminding him of who he could become, not who he was. That night, when he got home, he wrote a note on a small sheet of paper and pinned it above his bed. "Success is not for show. It is for purpose." As months passed, Grace noticed signs he tried to hide. Sometimes he avoided meals, sometimes he walked long distances instead of paying for transport, sometimes his shoes were so worn out he walked differently to hide discomfort. So she began quietly helping. She bought food for him and pretended it was extra. She loaned him transport money without recording it. She listened to him rehearse presentation speeches late at night. She ironed his shirt when electricity returned briefly. Not because she wanted to claim him, but because she believed he would succeed. And she wanted to be close enough to say, "I always knew." Daniel didn't take her kindness for granted. Every gesture entered a private vault inside his heart, a vault he would later open when the world thought he had lost his mind by choosing her. But life, as always, doesn't bless without testing, and just when Daniel saw a tiny glimpse of breakthrough, something happened that neither of them was prepared for. Just when life seemed to finally acknowledge Daniel's effort, he received an email that made him read the text repeatedly, unsure whether he was hallucinating or awake. He had been shortlisted for a young developer's business grant competition. Sponsored by a major investment group in Victoria Island, the winner would receive $15 million in seed capital, full mentorship, legal structuring, and partnership access. It wasn't just money, it was a doorway to everything he had dreamed of. When he showed Grace the email that night, she hugged him tightly, something she had never done before. Her voice trembled with excitement. "This is it, Daniel. This is the beginning you've been waiting for." For the first time since they met, he believed the same. For 2 weeks, he prepared like the world depended on it, because in his world, it did. Grace helped after work, staying awake with him under the dim fluorescent bulb while reading and rehearsing business plans, market strategies, projected valuation, and possible investor questions. She slept less, laughed less, and spent more time encouraging him than herself. Everything was ready. His suit was carefully ironed, his shoes were polished, his documents organized, his confidence restored. The final presentation was scheduled for a Monday morning at 9 a.m. in Victoria Island, but fate tested them on the Sunday night before it. Daniel was at home reviewing final points when his phone rang. It was a number from Benin City. He hesitated before answering, the voice on the other end was trembling, a neighbor from his mother's compound. "Daniel, come quickly. Your mother collapsed. She's unconscious. The doctors need a deposit before they can start treatment. Please come. Please." His hands went numb, his legs turned weak, his mind froze. The hospital demanded $600,000 immediately for emergency care. Daniel checked everything he owned. All his savings from months of working, skipping meals, and sacrificing comfort amounted to $118,000. It was not close, not even half. He tried calling every number he could think of, former colleagues, neighbors, distant relatives, anyone. But nobody responded positively. Some ignored his calls, some lied about not having money, some offered prayers instead of support. By midnight, he sat outside under the moonlight in Surulere, staring at his phone like it held the answer to life. He was faced with a decision that no human deserves: save the woman who raised him, or fight for the future he had worked years to reach. And for the first time since they met, Daniel couldn't control his tears. Grace found him outside, shaking, speechless, broken. She didn't ask for details, she simply sat beside him until he could breathe enough to speak. When he explained what happened, she held his hand tightly. "This isn't a choice between success and failure," she whispered. "It's a choice between tomorrow and eternity." Then she stood up, walked home silently, and returned 40 minutes later with a brown envelope. Inside was 700,000 Nigerian nairas, the entire remaining money that her late father left for her family as their only financial backup. Daniel froze. "No. Grace, no. I can't take that. It's all you have." She smiled, not happily, but with quiet acceptance. "Money can be rebuilt. A mother cannot." Before he could argue, she added, "If God kept me alive without luxury, I can live without a backup plan too." Her voice cracked slightly, but her resolve didn't. He cried as he accepted the envelope. She cried too, not because of the money, but because she knew life would not forgive that decision easily. And she was right. The storm that followed did not come immediately, but it came powerful enough to separate them completely. Daniel traveled to Benin City before dawn. He didn't sleep, didn't eat, didn't think. He clutched the brown envelope like it contained his entire soul, because it did. It contained Grace's trust. At the hospital, doctors confirmed that the payment was made just in time. His mother survived surgery, but needed days of observation. For the first time in months, Daniel exhaled. But while one life was being saved, another life somewhere else was quietly beginning to fall apart. The grant presentation he had prepared for months held no second chance policy. the judges waited. His name was called multiple times, a seat remained empty, a dream evaporated, his email later confirmed it coldly, candidate disqualified, no attendance. Those words were short, but they carried the weight of lost years. Still, Daniel was at peace with that part, but he couldn't rest about what it meant for Grace. He returned to Lagos 4 days later, ready to meet her, thank her again, and begin rebuilding. Even if it meant starting from nothing twice, but when he reached her compound, Grace was gone, her family's home had been vacated, neighbors only had pieces of information, they had issues with that property. Her uncle took over. Something about unpaid debt. There was an argument. They left one night. Some whispered, some shrugged, some pitied, but nobody knew where she went. Daniel searched every supermarket around Lagos. He asked old co-workers, neighbors, even her pastor. Everyone gave the same helpless answer, we haven't seen her since they moved. Days became weeks, weeks threatened to become months, and every night, Daniel walked the streets where they once sat, hoping the universe would return her like it misplaced her by accident. But she never appeared, her number was not going through, no message, no explanation, no goodbye, just absence where certainty once lived, and after months of searching, reality cornered him. Life had separated them, not because they stopped caring, but because survival demanded different battles. Daniel refused to let her sacrifice die quietly. He worked twice as hard as anyone around him, took freelance property jobs, handled commission marketing, attended free workshops, volunteered for networking events, and practiced business proposals like prayers. It took 4 more years, years filled with rejection, humiliation, and perseverance, but eventually, one presentation. In Lekki Phase 1 changed his story. An investor didn't just like his idea, he liked his hunger. From his first project, he earned his first millions. From his first millions, he built partnerships. From partnerships, he created Thompson Urban Developments Ltd., the company that later positioned him as one of Lagos' most influential real estate moguls before age 34. He had money, properties, connections, respect, and influence. But happiness never joined the celebration. Every office plaque reminded him of the woman who believed first. Every estate gate reminded him of the home she lost. Every success party reminded him of the wedding she didn't witness. And most night, his last whispered words were the same, I hope you're safe. For years, Grace and Daniel lived in the same city but in different worlds, never knowing how close or far the other truly was. Until one ordinary Thursday afternoon, fate placed them on a path neither could have predicted. Not through romance, not through drama, but through purpose. Daniel had been steadily expanding his corporate social responsibility efforts. His company often supported community education, widows, and single mothers, a project inspired by a memory he never allowed to fade. His team partnered with a small community learning center in Lagos, donating computers, books, furniture, and funding for teachers. The center requested to host a small appreciation event and insisted that Daniel personally attend, explaining that one of their staff members had a story connected to his foundation mission. He agreed, out of curiosity, not expectation. The event hall was modest, plastic chairs, chalkboards, children's drawings pinned to walls, and the smell of chalk and disinfectant lingering in the air. Daniel arrived quietly, without cameras or media, choosing his simplest attire, a plain white shirt, black trousers, and no security escort. He wanted humility, not headlines. He sat among the audience, waiting to understand why he had been specifically asked to attend. That was when the moderator announced, we would like to invite our team lead for community female empowerment, Mrs. Grace Williams, to give a short speech. Daniel's heartbeat paused, the room blurred. The air tightened. He didn't blink, afraid his eyes might deceive him, and then she walked in. He saw her first. Grace stepped forward slowly, holding a small handwritten note. She did not notice him, she wasn't even searching faces. She looked calm. Older, but in a graceful, matured way. Her hair was covered neatly in a scarf, her gown was simple, and her shoes were flat and comfortable. She carried no designer bags, no loud accessories, no attempt to impress, just like before, but there was strength in her posture, quiet confidence in her voice, and peace in her eyes. She spoke, not like someone who used to struggle, but like someone who understood struggle and healed from it. Sometimes, life does not take from us to punish us, she said softly. It takes from us so we can learn to rebuild, not from comfort, but from courage. The room clapped gently. Daniel didn't. He couldn't move. He felt every memory come back. The supermarket, the late-night talks, the brown envelope, the sacrifice, the disappearance. and the empty streets he searched. For the first time in years, he saw her not as the girl who disappeared, but as a woman who survived. As the program ended, parents and children gathered to greet her. She smiled kindly, comforting each person with warm words. Daniel remained seated, waiting until she was finally free. And then she turned, their eyes locked, familiar, deep, unforgettable. She froze, not from fear, not from shock, but from 1,000 unspoken sentences landing at once. Neither smiled, neither cried, neither rushed. It was the kind of silence only two people who once shared destiny could understand. He took slow steps toward her, and when he finally stood close enough to hear her breathing, he spoke her name the same way he did the night before she disappeared, Grace. She inhaled slowly, steadied herself, and replied his name as though it had lived quietly in her chest, Daniel. That was all, no hug, no apology, no accusation, just recognition. Because some reunions are too sacred to spoil with immediate words, they stepped aside from the buzzing hall, choosing a quiet open space behind the building where evening breeze softened the tension. No one followed. No one interrupted. They stood facing each other, not as billionaire and community worker, but as two people with unfinished history. For a long moment, neither spoke. Silence had to breathe first. Finally, Daniel broke it. I searched for you everywhere. His voice wasn't accusing, just painfully honest. Grace lowered her gaze, not in guilt but in quiet acceptance. I know. Daniel swallowed hard. He waited. She understood the silent request. Help me understand. She exhaled slowly, gathering the courage to revisit wounds she had sealed. That night I gave you the money, she began softly. I knew things would change. But I didn't know how drastically. After Daniel left for Benin, the family argument exploded. Her father's cousin, who managed their late father's property affairs, stormed in demanding repayment, accusing her of irresponsibility and betrayal. Within days, legal documents were served, and Grace's family lost rights to the two-room property. Her widowed mother fell into emotional shock. Her siblings blamed her, not fully understanding the reason behind her action. Grace became the anchor everyone dragged their pain on. She took responsibility silently. She moved them into a small temporary apartment in another part of the city, using the little savings she had left. To support them, she worked 2 jobs, slept less, spent nothing on herself, and hid her breakdown from everyone. Daniel's name became too painful to say, because mentioning him meant thinking about what could no longer be repaired. It wasn't your fault, she whispered, but I didn't know how to tell you everything without adding weight to what you were already carrying. After a year, a man named John Williams, a comm technician who lived in the same area, became close to her family. He respected her, accepted her truth, and helped stabilize her siblings. He wasn't wealthy, but he was responsible and kind. When he asked to marry me, I accepted, she said, voice steady but tender, not because I stopped caring about you, but because life needed structure more than emotion. Together, they built a modest, peaceful life. They had 2 children, Michael and Ella, the 2 Daniel saw in the event hall. Their life was simple but safe, until tragedy came, not supernatural, not dramatic, simply a fatal road accident on 3rd Mainland Bridge. She became a widow with 2 children overnight. She paused, blinking slowly, not to cry, but to remain in control. Everything I am now is because I had to rebuild from zero. Twice. Daniel felt his throat tighten, not just because of her suffering, but because she endured all of it alone. He spoke carefully, not wanting to break the moment. You didn't owe me silence. Grace met his eyes, finally, fully, and you didn't owe me a lifetime of repayment. His gaze softened, pain mixing with admiration. You were never my charity case, Grace. You were my turning point. She didn't smile, but her eyes warmed, the closest she had allowed herself to. The shadows grew longer and the event organizer came looking for her. She adjusted her scarf, ready to re-enter the hall. We can talk again. When it's comfortable, she said gently. He nodded, not wanting to rush destiny. I'm not in a hurry anymore. For the first time in years, their goodbye felt open, not final. They walked back separately, as 2 lives slowly reconnecting with patience instead of pressure. Life after the wedding didn't become a fairy tale overnight, but it grew gentle in ways both of them quietly prayed for. Grace no longer walked into rooms feeling like she didn't belong. She learned how to breathe without apologizing for taking up space. Daniel didn't treat her like someone he rescued or owed. He treated her like someone he genuinely wanted beside him. The children adjusted faster than anyone expected. They grew into the new home slowly, exploring each room one at a time, hanging their drawings on the fridge, and filling the silence with laughter that softened every wall. Daniel never forced a title or position with them, he simply showed up every day until their hearts accepted him naturally. They built routines that made sense, shared breakfast on the dining table, evening walks in the compound, school conversations, movie nights on the couch. Some days were easy, some were quiet, but none of them felt like survival anymore. Grace continued her community work because it mattered to her, and Daniel supported it proudly, not privately. Every now and then, when life felt unusually peaceful, they would look at each other with the quiet realization that love didn't return to them to rewrite what happened. It returned to show them what could still happen. And even though the world once questioned them, they learned that true happiness doesn't need approval, just honesty, patience, and a heart that stays. The story teaches that genuine love and lasting relationships are not built on wealth, social status, beauty, or public approval, but on the invisible values that stand strong when life becomes difficult: sacrifice, loyalty, honesty, patience, and emotional maturity. It shows that a person's true worth is revealed not when everything is perfect, but in how they show up when there is nothing to offer but sincerity and support. It reminds us that real connection is formed through shared struggles, quiet understanding, and mutual respect, not through flashy gestures or public validation, and that sometimes the most meaningful relationships are the ones that survive heartbreak, silence, growth, and distance. Ultimately, it reveals that love is not about finding someone perfect, but choosing someone who is willing to grow, heal, communicate, and build with you, slowly, truthfully, and with a peaceful heart. If you enjoyed this story and want more inspiring, emotional and meaningful tales like this, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Your engagement helps these stories reach others who need them too. Share this with someone who believes in second chances, quiet love, and true partnership, and let me know in the comments what you learned, what touched you most, and which story you'd love to see next. Stay connected, stay inspired, more powerful stories are coming.